Good morning, everybody. We are in Paris at Magdalena Cafe today. We are celebrating our Sustainable Development Day at SOMFY. And as we all know, climate change is impacting cities, is impacting our daily life. Today, temperature in Paris will be 25 degrees. And so we need both mitigation to reduce our impacts, and we also need adaptation to prepare our cities, our lives, to a different climate context. And so for this conference today, I am hosting Antoine Poincaré from AXA Climate.
Hi, Bruno.
Thank you, Antoine. Nice to be with you today. And we are inviting Antoine to have this discussion with insurance, because you will tell us how much insurance is at the forefront of this change. Tell us about AXA Climate.
So if you start from an insurance point of view, when you look at climate change, you're looking at more natural disaster, natural catastrophes. One big number to keep in mind is last year, it was around 450 billion in costs for natural disaster, out of which only 150 is covered by insurance. The rest is what we call the insurance gap. It happens and nobody is insured, and we have to pay for it. We can be the companies, can be you and me, individual, or it can be the state. So we have a rising cost, a rising pressure from climate change. Once you have that, as an insurer, what are your options? Basically, you have two. Either you say, I don't cover this risk anymore, and you get out of the market, and that's happening in some region of the world, or you raise premium, you raise deductible, you lower, I would say, the quality of service. And both solutions we are unhappy with both solutions. Lowering the quality of service is not good for the business. Getting out is not good for the business either. Neither, exactly. So the point, when we looked at it from AXA, was to say, as long as we stay at the end of the value chain, we are the one paying when something bad happens, our options are very, very limited. So what we need to do is work our way up the value chain in order to help companies adapt and transition. And mostly adapt in order to reduce the exposure so that when a climate disaster hits, we remain within areas that are insurable.
Just maybe before we dive in adaptation and your activities in this scope, a couple of figures about AXA, because some of some of us don't know exactly the big figures about AXA.
AXA is big. AXA is 150,000 people worldwide, covering both our day-to-day risk, and originally we were working on this, so B2C, small professional. And since the last 10 years, we've been focusing a lot of what we call systemic risk, so the big risk, big players. So we cover from you and me when we have a car, to very, very large company, airports, everything, airports, energy, infrastructures, commodities,
and these 450 billion damages last year, of which 1/3 only is covered by insurance contracts. How big is it versus the past? 5-10 years ago?
When you look at it versus the last 10-year average, it was plus 15%.
Plus 15 versus last 10-year average.
Last 10-year average, that's pretty big. We know that we had the hottest year ever recorded last year. And when it's hotter, it means that mostly it's more humid. And when it's more humid, it means that everything that you can think of, hurricanes, floods, etc., are more intense. Yeah. So we don't think that this plus 15 is the new normal. We think it's gonna rise. Keep rising. So we have a real, very big pressure on this. And so an adaptation was the poor children of the transition for the last 10 or 20 years. We were all thinking we need to mitigate, we need to reduce our emission, and talking about adaptation was tricky because it was a bit abandoning our objectives. We had a minister in France who said we need to get ready for plus 4 degrees in France. Yeah. When he said that, newspapers were like, wow, we talk about plus 2 degrees.
The objective is be lower.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's where we are going today. We're going in a world of plus 3 degrees, a France of plus 4 degrees.
Nevertheless, we need to mitigate. We need to do both.
Absolutely.
Mitigate and adapt.
Absolutely, because if we don't mitigate as we are doing right now, and we are doing efforts, not quickly enough, but we are doing efforts, we will get higher than 4 degrees, and even 4 degrees, especially for agriculture, we're talking on some stuff that are not going to be adaptable.
Thank you.
That's a very, very big item. So 4 degrees, our ability to live in 4 degrees is not a given. we need to fight.
Yes.
We need to protect houses like you do. We need to protect businesses, but it's not a given. We need to invest a lot.
It's not a given even for ecosystems.
Absolutely. The pressure
So
in forest agriculture.
maybe what we can do, I propose you, Antoine, is to explore Paris.
Absolutely.
To have a live exploration of Paris. We are downtown in the old Paris, in the Haussmannian Paris. And then we're going to explore another eco-district in the western side of the city. Because exploring, we can see how cities will need or are managing the adaptation. Paris is one of the fast-moving cities to try to adapt. And we're going to explore this and how SOMFY and our solutions can contribute to protect the buildings.
Yeah, but let's do that. We are in the middle of Paris, so it's a good example to look at.
Let's start. Thank you.
Good.
So, Antoine, tell us about AXA Climate. How AXA did this move to jump in the climate advising and consulting project?
The idea behind this creation, it was 2019, was to say that if we are only the insurer, if we are only here when problem happens and we pay back, our business model is not sustainable. I mentioned that insurance at some point has only bad option to get out of that. So if we want to work with companies to make it clearer and to help them adapt, we need to be sooner in the value chain. So that's how we were thinking. Back then we were something like 20 people. Now we are 200 people. How can we serve clients?
200 people.
200 people, around 50 million turnover. So that's
In which type of geographies are you playing this?
so most of our staff is in Paris, but we have people in Africa, we have people in Asia, in India, a country under a lot of pressure, typically from heat wave, some people in America. So we cover companies all around the world. And the idea was to say, how can we help? And we realized that the first thing we could do to help was to share the data. We have data as an insurer because that's how we
collect all the data from the damages.
Absolutely, that's how we used to do it, looking at the data from the past. But now we need to look at the data projection in the future because the risks are rising. So we have less statisticians, we have more scientists. We have climatologists, we have hydrologists, people that read the science report and look at the models in order to see what will the risk be like in 5, 10, 20 years.
So AXA Climate is able to locate the risk for any company or any customer and project it in 2040, 2050.
Exactly. And that is the first part of our business. We call it adaptation consulting. We look at companies. Where are you located? Okay, I have a seat near Annecy, and I have my main supplier who is in Morocco. In that precise location, what are the risks? In terms of floods today, maybe there's one every 10 years. If tomorrow there are one every 5 years, all of a sudden, you can make new investment in order to adapt, in order to protect your company. So sharing the data that is really the treasure of insurance company in order to make a decision that is not insuring but protecting your own assets is a complete change of business model for us. It's a shift, it's a massive shift, but this is how we think we can keep those companies insurable because if you don't do anything, then you are going out of insurability, which is a main
topic. Does it mean that you propose to your customers to subscribe not only damages insurance, but adaptation fees or adaptation
consulting? Yes. What's interesting is we don't do it only for our clients in the insurance part. Some clients are not insured with AXA.
Okay, but you propose it to any
exactly. Our end game is to keep them insurable. If they are not insurable, even with a competition, then we are out of business altogether.
With this climate change, is there a risk that the insurance system goes to failure somewhere in the future?
Insurance is a very important of our economic stability. So everybody will fight so that it doesn't happen. But yes, if we start not insuring some risk or some companies or some location, then those locations become unhabitable. If you're uninsurable, all of a sudden you don't do any businesses. So that's a question of territories because you need insurance for the rest to work. If you don't have insurance, you don't take a loan, you don't take a mortgage, and the whole economic system fails.
So it's one of the fundamentals of the economic system.
Absolutely, and that's why it's heavily regulated. That's why the state has a big role to play. So really, maintaining insurability is what we are about. So that goes with consulting, but it's not only technical measures that are going to help you adapt. Our reasoning was to say, if we want company to understand the transition, we need their staff to be able to understand.
Be on board.
Exactly. It's a big transformation. We had the digital transformation 15 years ago. We needed everybody in the company on board. We have the same kind of challenge with the sustainable.
Climate, yeah.
Exactly. The climate transition altogether, both from a reducing emission point of view, but also adapting.
So for this, you also prepared a school.
Exactly. We launched the climate school, so a training program basically that we did with AXA employee, but then with 5 million employees in companies all over the world, be it bank, industrial company, transport company, utilities, other insurer, and we help train staff so that they understand what's going on, but also the impact on their business. You're in sales, you're in HR, you're in finance. How is it gonna touch your day-to-day and your activity? And we are lucky enough that SOMFY decided to train their employees with the climate school. Can you tell us a bit about the why? Why do you do this kind of thing in a company like SOMFY?
Yes, for sure. I mean, SOMFY has very deeply rooted ambition to be one of the companies that plays a role on both mitigating our impact. So we have a carbon roadmap. We are working to develop, let's say, the most performing sustainable solutions, and also to adapt the buildings. We are equipping the buildings. We're going to visit Paris. We're going to explore this. We are equipping the buildings to make sure that any window that could become a problem in a warmer climate, it can be protected to have resilient buildings. And we wanted also to make this part of our culture. We want all our teams to be on board, to understand what's going on. And it's part of a large program. We're going to train 4,000 people this year and next year. And for us, it's part of the DNA of the company to be a resilient company that contributes, lowering its impacts and bringing solutions that last, that we can repair, that will be working for a super long time, and that will have a positive impact on buildings on both temperature and energy. Just temperature, a couple of figures. We are in Paris today. We are mid-May. It's gonna be 25 degrees. End of April, it was 30 degrees in Paris. And from India to Africa, end of April, they had sort of a heat wave up to 15 degrees. I mean, we are experiencing a new context, and buildings, most of the buildings we're gonna visit it are already built and are not adapted to this change. So as you said, insurance is totally transforming, because, I mean, it's changing the full equation.
And that's a very important point. The point is not only to look at the risk and pay back at the end. We'll need to make some heavy investment. You're lucky enough to be one of the company
that can contribute.
Exactly, that can contribute, and which purpose is very much aligned with both energy efficiency, as you mentioned, and livability for people in cities. And cities are a very big challenge. It's where we emit the most, but it's also where people have the most economic activity, where we have a very, very high density. And so going back to this training thing, when you have a company which purpose is so aligned with what you want to do, explaining it to your staff, which maybe didn't join for that.
And that's why dealing with you with this climate school was making a lot of sense.
But maybe let's explore Paris, because we are near the quartier of the Madeleine, and we look at how much a city like Paris is adapted or not, and the big challenges it's going to have.
Yeah. Antoine, as you said, cities are at the heart of the question. We are in cities emitting more, and we are more exposed, especially to the heat island effect. Can you tell us about it?
Exactly. This idea of heat island is when you have a city, it tends to be warmer than the countryside around.
How much is it?
Plus 4-5 degrees, especially during heat waves. So when it's already 30 degrees, well, as you mentioned, in the Paris
35.
area, you can get a feeling of 35. Why? We can see it here. There are a bunch of trees, but very limited. So not enough green and not enough blue. We are lacking water. We are lacking everything that we can use to cool.
To mitigate.
Exactly. And then you have some architectural effect. Streets in Paris, they are very wide. So that means that in building, you are very much exposed to heat, or that kind of thing. And the cars that are here, there are too many cars. You can see it around there. And as long as we have thermal engine cars, it plays a role into trapping the heat in the city. We are really living some kind of a heat dome within the cities. And in Paris, we know that around 2050, we could experience the first days at 50 degrees and
50 degrees
Celsius in Paris.
In more or less 20 years from now,
exactly.
It's more or less the trajectory.
Exactly, and so it's exceptional, but it's going to happen. And the mayor's office is looking at it, so they are interviewing professional inhabitants to say, how can we live at 50 degrees? How can we protect the elderly? How can we protect the children in school? All those questions that are being asked. We need to make our city compatible with a warming future.
Very clear. And so here we're in all cities, so there is really a question of adapting buildings that were not prepared. I mean,
exactly.
That's the sake.
And what can you tell us about those kind of facades, those kind of buildings, and how can we protect them from the heat coming at them?
So we're going to explore maybe deeper in a moment in another place, but I will introduce here one of the stakes we have in our industry at SOMFY, equipping sun protection that goes on the windows, is also searching for solutions that can fit with this architecture.
Yeah.
Because, more than 80% of the buildings by 2050 in Europe are already existing. So we need
That's an important figure. Huh?
Yes.
80% of what we're going to have in 2050
is already
today.
existing, is already built.
So we can't do deep renovation or this kind of thing in those buildings.
We need to
work
manage
with
renovation, which is affordable, money-wise,
yeah.
and also adapted to the context. And for windows protection, because as climate becoming warmer, any window is becoming a heat generator.
Yeah.
So we need to protect the windows. And so in our industry, we are with our partners working to promote different solutions. There is not only the roller shutter, which is very common in France. We have external Venetian blinds with plates that protect, that you can orient to protect from the sun. And we have also a lot of solutions with fabric-based screens, awnings that can go in these typical old buildings because it's less intrusive, it is smaller, it is easier, and also more adapted to this type of construction. So we really have, as an industry, an effort to customize the solution to make it affordable and adapted to very different type of constructions. But as you said, the big challenge is going fast to adapt buildings that have been built years or centuries ago in a climate that was not raising any question. At the end of the day, you were a bit warm in Paris 2-3 months a year, and that's it. And now, from April more or less to October or November, you can get.
And that's a good example of adaptation being the poor children of the transition,
Exactly.
because we have regulation on refurbishing the flats if you need them to be energy efficient, if you want to be able to rent them. But everything you mentioned about being able to live in your flat during the summer, it's up to the citizen to decide what they want to do. There's no regulation.
Now French regulation is starting to consider adaptation and summer comfort as a parameter, but we need to raise it everywhere because, in fact, in the past, most of the European and Northern Hemisphere buildings were prepared to cold.
Yeah.
The big challenge was the cold. Now the big challenge will become the summer.
Massive shift on architecture that we see we can't change. Well, we can't change Paris here because it's Madeleine and it's the very postal card Paris, but there are some new areas of Paris that we're going to discover together.
And we're going to discover another example.
Exactly, that are brand new and more adapted to the future that is coming.
Exactly. Thank you. So Antoine, we moved across Paris a few minutes and we are in a different place. Where are we?
Absolutely. We left the historic city center with La Madeleine, and here we are up north, but still in Paris. As you can see behind us, it's still the classic Paris. The streets are quite narrow. The architecture is Haussmannian. And here we are in a very big park called Martin Luther King Park, 10 hectares. So it's very big, very unusual for Paris. Brand new, more than a park, it's also we call that an eco neighborhood. So we rethink all that is brand new, all that is less than 10 years old. And it's a good way to explore how we can make our cities more livable from, I would say, a political point of view or public sector point of view. So what can we tell about it? There are three main colors, actually, if you want to keep in mind what we can do. What are those three main colors? The first one is green. As you can see, we put more and more trees, more and more plants because it's a protection. It's obviously, it serves carbon mitigation.
It's a sort of a regulator.
Exactly. It's, you can say, a natural air conditioner if you want. So tomorrow, this place can become a shelter when there are some heat waves, when people within Paris need to find some fresh air. So this first big color is green. The second color that is very important is blue. Here, you have a lot of water. Why do you do that? Because when it's hot, water brings freshness, but it's also when it rains too much, we want to store the water in this park. So it's really more blue, more green, and it's something we can keep in mind in terms of urban planning, how we do.
So it's a way of bringing nature inside the city.
Absolutely. And Paris is not the only one to do that. There is in Barcelona, typically, there's a eco-neighborhood called District 22. More and more in new places, when we have the opportunity to build something new, that's how cities are making their city center more livable. And the third color that we need to keep in mind is related to architecture and buildings. And as you can see, it's white. The buildings are whiter than in the rest of Paris. Even the ground here is white. Why? Because it reflects sunshine and heat.
Capturing less heat.
Exactly, it's the same effect. Typically, I didn't envision it would be that hot in Paris. I'm too dark with this jacket, and so I'm capturing the heat. The whiter we are around us, the more heat.
The better you manage the heat.
Exactly, we throw back, and that's how they build that. So you can really keep those three colors as a way to think when you design new places: the green, the blue, the white. So Bruno, now we are near those brand new buildings. Can you tell us a bit what are the available solutions to adapt to this kind of building?
Yes, this neighborhood finally is sort of a typical example of the engineering for climate for buildings. Hopefully, I mean, it's a new construction, so engineers could imagine it from scratch. First, you have a very good insulation system and ventilation system to make sure that the building the envelope is at the right level of performance. Second, all windows are high performance windows with sun protection systems, solar protection systems on all of them, different types, different geometries. Third, I mean, you see it everywhere. Nature is back. It's not only buildings, streets, and cars. It's about free spaces, open spaces with trees, with green, as you said.
Which is important for airflow as well. The wider you are, when there is some fresh air coming from the trees, it can go through buildings and neighborhoods.
Especially by night.
Yeah.
And so one of the typical solutions also that we could imagine here is also opening system for windows that help people to ventilate by night, to cool down the temperature by night. And so all in all, in such buildings, air conditioning is, let's say, maybe needed, but for me, we see it as the last, let's say, necessary solution to cope with climate context. So starting with insulation, windows, solar protection systems, night cooling, air, bringing air inside, and putting vegetables and trees and green spaces in the cities to adapt it to this new context.
Your point is very important. AC, it's already 7% of greenhouse gas emission in the world, so it's twice airplane typically. But we need it. That we are still underserved in some areas. And so in the area in which we can live without, especially through technology, as you mentioned, we need to reduce in order to leave space for countries that don't have any choice, because it's still a very efficient solution that actually saves lives.
Exactly. And so in this scope, we had a great example also, not in housing. This is housing. This is a housing neighborhood mainly. But we had also a nice project with schools. Okay. Usually schools in France are, for the summer period, were closed during the hottest months, July and August. Now, hot season can start from April, May, up to October, as you say. And so we had an example with the Ville de Poissy that was trying to find solutions to manage, let's say, comfortable schools, to make sure that, school is running well, and managing these heat periods from May up to October. And so they decided to protect all the windows with what we call screens, fabric screens. And this solution can be fitted on any building. It's a very, let's say, adapted to any type of window, including large-scale windows. It's also keeping the light inside, so children can keep, the school is working normally.
Right, you don't realize when you're
not in the dark. In fact, you keep the light in, so it's managing the glare, it's keeping temperature, heat outside, and the temperature gap that they measure is 5 degrees. Okay. A window without and a window with this solution, they have 5-degree gaps, and so they consider in the Ville de Poissy, they've been equipping 15 schools, that the return on investment is 4 years only, considering the amount of cost that would represent energy, installation, and maintenance of an air conditioning.
So the saving on AC makes it profitable in 4 years, which is nothing for schools that are here.
Schools is a long-term investment, and with a very comfortable solution also for people inside, because you have also, with these hot days, you have the glare impact. Yeah. So you also have to manage the light.
That's a great example of refitting existing in buildings. You have the same in cities, actually. We have some squares in Paris that were very, very mineral and that we completely change. There are some examples in Place de Catalogne, in Place de l'Hôtel de Ville that are really city jungle, as they call it. You really kill all the stones here. You don't allow the cars to pass by anymore, and you plant a lot of trees. And it's what you can do, and it's very, very useful for people that are living just nearby the schools, but also individual people living there.
Great.
We know we talked about new buildings, but typically I live in a building that already exists. What can we do as individuals if we want to protect ourselves within the remit of our flat?
It's very simple. I mean, for your home, for your flat, for any home, we have solutions. All type of solutions, from shutters to Venetian blinds to screens to awnings. All these, let's say, catalog options of solutions can fit any type of building, any type of window, any type of situation to mitigate the impact and adapt the building. There is another important point. It is better if you automate it. When you bring not only the shading systems, but also the automation, then you make sure that you optimize the protection while you are present or not. You can also, in the winter, bring the heat inside to get, free heating. And in the summer, even if you are not at home, you can manage your comfort. And the data we get from it is that in Europe, the benefit in the summer is between 4 to 7 degrees that you avoid, 4 to 7 degrees of extra heat that you protect inside. And in the winter, it can also contribute to reduce the heating needs. So it's a very impactful for comfort, for the glare, for the light management, and also for energy efficiency. So now it's just the question of making it available for everybody, making it aware for everybody. And any professional can come to your flat and fit it on an existing building. You don't need big works. It's really adapted to existing buildings.
And so the future is an intelligent flat that kind of regulates itself without me thinking about it.
Exactly. That can be weather connected. Weather adapted. So these smart shading systems are really bringing not only comfort, but energy efficient solutions. And you know that in the world, we consider that 1/3 of the energy need is waste. And we are in Paris. In a couple of decades, we're going to get 50, 45, 50 degrees here. And so we need to adapt the buildings to this new context and not to the past of our experience. So really, solutions are ready. Now we're going to push a lot to make it aware for everybody with the whole industry of the sun protection systems. It's a big challenge. It's a race in a couple of decades to adapt the buildings.
And maybe as a conclusion for me, what I wanted to say, and we experienced that, is that adapting the cities, adapting our lives to heat wave is a lot of different actors that we need to coordinate. I want to protect myself, obviously. The company wants to protect itself, its employees, its site. But we need to adapt the school, because if you have a great site and your kids don't go to school because it's too hot, then you're not adapted. So this is why it's complicated. We need public sector, we need institutions, we need companies, and we need individuals to adapt. And we need to do that very quickly. As you mentioned, this is a challenge. It's a race to adaptation.
Yes, and for this reason also, I'm very happy that we can have this discussion together. I mean, SOMFY, equipping the buildings, equipping the shading systems, and AXA, adapting, rising adaptation programs and consulting. And so, as you say, it's a question of ecosystem. It's a question of thinking together, working together, and also accelerating the move, because 2050 is tomorrow. I mean, and also what is very important is that our industry, the building industry, is a long-range industry that was used to make things for decades, super long-lasting. And now we're going to adapt to this. And so SOMFY is very ambitious on both mitigating its impact and contributing to buildings adaptation, which is, let's say, a benefit for everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Antoine, for being with us today.